All right, so this video we're going to talk about the end of the Cold War, why all of a sudden it happened. All right, so just to recap, the United States and the Soviet Union, they've been battling in all these different areas. You got North Korea, you got Vietnam, over here you got the Cuban Missile Crisis. You can see they've fought each other in virtually every continent. Obviously not Australia, Antarctica, etc. But yeah, they've been battling over these ideologies for a long time. All right, so all throughout the 50s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, they've been fighting Middle East, Africa, Asia, all over the globe. All right. And then they had that period of a détente where they decide to relax tensions, try to limit weapons. Well, that's going to end when the USSR when they invade Afghanistan, and we're going to supply troops, or not troops, but weapons. All right, and so in the Cold War timeline left off from in 1970, Soviet Union invades Afghanistan. Well, a guy by the name of Ronald Reagan is going to come into power in 1980. And he's going to reignite the war that took place between the two superpowers. He's going to say we need to get rid of this thing. We need to reignite the Cold War, and we're going to win this thing. All right, his goal is to win the Cold War, and he wants to establish America as the superpower. He starts out by just calling them the evil empire. And what he's going to do is he's going to ramp up the arms race to try to outspend the Soviet Union, to show their superiority militarily and economically. All right, so he spends $2 trillion to increase the size of the military, sent over 500 ICBMs, that's intercontinental ICBMs, ballistic missiles, to Western Europe to protect the Allies. All right, so he's arming his allies. He's sending weapons to his allies. He even sends this, and we either have watched the video or you will watch the video on the Star Wars program, where he wants to create a system of satellites. So if the Soviet Union launched nuclear weapons, these satellites could zap them out of the sky, basically. And it was really more of what he hoped to do. Obviously, they didn't have the technology for this, but he had introduced it. Like, so if the Soviets want to fire their nukes at us, we're going to be able to zap them before they get to us, and then launch a counterattack. All right, and so that was his goal. Right? It was called Strategic Defense Initiative. The public quickly named it Star Wars because it read like science fiction. And another guy is going to come into power. So Reagan's going to take the power to fight to the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union is going to try to keep up, but they're going to have all sorts of problems. All right, they are going to have a bunch of built-in problems. Some of the problems are Soviet socialism did not offer incentives for hard work. By the 1980s, the USSR had very low industrial and agricultural production. For a while, they had high industrial production with like Stalin, because it's like, oh, if we don't do this, we're going to die. Well, they've de-Stalinized. They've kind of scaled back some of his harsh policies. Well, now it's like if they have no threat hanging over them to do it or they'll die, or they have no benefit to do it because they don't make any more money, what's the incentive? And that's kind of the whole problem with communism. And so they have low output in their country, very very limited goods. They spent 50% of their military budget either fighting in Afghanistan, maintaining troops in Eastern Europe. They're trying to keep up with the arms race that Reagan introduced, and so they're spending, and it's a communist society, which means the government dictates what is being spent. They're spending most of their budget on military that they may never even use. All right, and so they have to try to keep up with this arms race, so that's spending money on that. And then the Soviet government obviously is restricting these freedoms. No alternative opinions. There's no other there's no democratic elections, and this is starting to wear on the Soviet Union. These are all the problems that the Soviet Union is having. And so Gorbachev is going to come in with all these problems. A guy by the name of Mikhail Gorbachev. All right, he comes in and he's going to try to address these issues. All right. So he's going to take 3 major reforms to try to save the Soviet Union. All right, now this is important. He's actually going to try to save it. So one of the reforms he tries to introduce called glasnost. All right, it means openness. He's going to try to encourage freedom of speech, things that they never have had, freedoms of speech, expression of new ideas, etc. He wants to create a system of openness that has never been present in the Soviet Union. The next one he wants to do is perestroika, which basically is he wants to take off the government. The government's the one that's in control of everything. how much they spend, how much they sell goods for, what they do. He wants to relax some of that. He wants to give over. He wants to basically introduce some capitalism, which is what the United States believes in. He wants to give over some of the controls to the farmers and the factories to try to make production more efficient because they have been failing. And then lastly, he wants to introduce some democratization. He wants to allow for citizens to be able to vote. All right. And so these things, he's like, these are areas that we're lagging behind in. Let's try to make changes so we can improve. All right. Gorbachev, another thing that he does, he's like, and this is going to be a couple key things that he's going to do as well. So those are the three major reforms that he introduces in the Soviet Union. Okay, so that's key. That's in the Soviet Union. So the next part of your notes is going to say, addition reforms that he made to foreign policy. So now this is outside of the Soviet Union. He is going to give up on the arms race. All right, him and Reagan are going to soon sign some treaties to where they start to limit their weapons. So basically, Reagan wants to spend, try to get them to the point where they break, and now he's going to start to reduce the weapons. Gorbachev withdrew. He's going to withdraw Soviet tank divisions from communist nations in Eastern Europe. All right, he's going to get out of Afghanistan. All right. And Reagan and Gorbachev are going to form quite a friendship out of this. All right, they are going to reduce Cold War tensions. All right, by the time Gorbachev comes into power, they're going to reduce the amount of weapons they have. They'll end their medium-range intercontinental ballistic missiles, and so they're trying to figure out a way to reduce the spending. And once again, Gorbachev especially is trying to fix the Soviet Union. All right, it's broken. He's trying to fix it. All right, and let me go through. And so his reforms, he thinks he's trying to save communism, but they just don't. They never really work. So what reforms happen? Well, with Glasnost, with this openness, Gorbachev announced that satellite states, with part of his openness, they should be able to freely choose their own government. All right, and so these satellite states that have once been controlled by the Soviet Union, we talked about the Hungarian invasion of the Soviet Union, we talked about Prague Spring, the invasion of Czechoslovakia. Any time in the past where they tried to break free, the Soviet Union rolled their tanks in and said, hey, what are you guys doing? It looks like you're trying to get rid of communism. That ain't happening. Well, now Gorbachev's saying, you should be free to choose whatever government you want. And loosening of these controls is going to politically weaken. Now the communists that exist in those countries, they can't just rule with an iron fist, because if you're citizens of that country and you're like, we should get a new government, it's like, what are you going to do? You're going to rebel and have you're going to have 500,000 Soviet troops invade your country, kill all the resistance, and then prop up their government. So there's really no point to rebel. Well, now that the Soviet Union's like, we're not going to support you anymore, you can freely choose your own government, the communist leaders that are in charge are like, oh crap, we're in trouble. All right, and so they're going to start to collapse. All right, and one by one, the Eastern European nations that are called within the Soviet sphere, these Soviet satellites that we've talked about for a long time, because Gorbachev says we are not going to use our military to intervene with you anymore to stop these revolutions, one by one they're going to start to crumble. The Berlin Wall is going to end up getting torn down, that had divided East Berlin and West Berlin. You can see one by one, Poland is going to, in 1988, Poland is going to break free. They are going to defeat the communists. Hungary, East Germany, then Czechoslovakia. Once again, one by one, these communist nations that were always stuck with the communist government, because the Soviet Union, anytime they tried to do any rebellion, they would march in. Now they don't have that, so they're just one by one breaking free. You can see Germany. You can see, obviously, if you look at a map, there's no longer East and West Germany, because Germany is going to reunite as a whole country. East and West will unite. The only one that was really, really nasty was Romania. That guy tried hanging on to power, and it got pretty ugly. But most of these fell pretty easily. All right, so the impact of the Eastern Bloc's fall from communism, end of the Warsaw Pact. The pact no longer exists. As the states rejected communism, they became null and void. All right, so the Warsaw Pact dissolved in 91 of July. As a result of this glasnost, the Soviet Union is going to break up into several. It's made up of a variety of Soviet republics, and they wanted to have their own independence. It's made up of many different ethnic groups, and they all want to be break free as well. And so you can see all these, as a result of these openness. All these nations, all this purple was once part of the Soviet Union. But now it is part of, now they are breaking free because there are all these little republics. Remember, the Soviet Union was called the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic. So it's not just Russia, it had a bunch of these smaller republics, all these different ethnic groups that make it up. And they break free from the Soviet Union to have their own country. Well, Ukraine is an area today that still is hotly contested because they're constantly fighting the Russians. The Russians are trying to gain back some of their territory that they had lost when it broke apart. And so these are still issues that are going on today, some strife in this region, but they're going to all start to, one by one, break free from Soviet control. Once again, this red line all used to be the Soviet Union, and you can see all the new countries that are created as a result of that. All right, there's no longer, it's Russia and all these other countries that have broken free. And the guy by the name of Boris Yeltsin is going to come over. They're going to try to get Gorbachev out of power. It's going to fail. Boris Yeltsin is going to take over. Gorbachev is going to basically resign on Christmas Day of '91, and as a result of that, the Soviet Union is going to effectively break up, ending communism in the Soviet Union. And so, while the West regards Gorbachev as a hero to the people, he was kind of ridiculed and mocked because it was this once great nation that has fallen. But really, he took over a really, really desperate situation. So Gorbachev takes over a really desperate situation, and so as a result of that, the Cold War is going to end. When the Soviet Union disbands, America is left as the world's only superpower. And I'm just going to stop here, actually. All the effects, all the things that he hoped would happen to save the Soviet Union backfired, and so as a result of that, that's how the Cold War ends.